The crystal tumbler shattered against the marble fireplace, amber liquid splashing across imported Italian stone. Dominic Westerly watched the destruction with cold satisfaction before turning to face his uncle, who sat unmoved behind the antique mahogany desk that had witnessed 3 decades of ruthless business decisions. A contractual marriage, Dominic repeated, his voice carrying the same lethal quiet that had made tech rivals tremble across negotiation tables. "Have you completely lost your mind, Uncle Richard?" Richard Westerly adjusted his platinum watch. With practiced indifference, the gesture more calculated than casual. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seattle's skyline glittered 40 floors below like the empire it was his empire. Or, at least it had been until this moment. Valmed is about to secure FDA approval for their neural interface technology, Richard stated, his tone as flat as a quarterly earnings report. If they succeed, they'll revolutionize medical treatment protocols worldwide. This marriage secures our position, their lead researcher for exclusive distribution rights, and a controlling interest. The board voted unanimously. Dominic ran his hand through his dark hair, destroying the perfect styling that had taken his. Personal stylist 30 minutes that morning? I don't care if they voted to name a constellation after me. I'm not marrying some lab rat just because she's developed a fancy medical device. Richard's thin smile never reached his eyes. He slid a manila folder across the polished surface between them. Naomi Valdez graduated with highest honors from Johns Hopkins. She holds 12 patents and has revolutionized neural interface design. Hardly a lab rat. The folder landed with a soft thud. Dominic stared at it as if it contained a prison sentence, which in many ways it did. The agreement has been finalized. Richard continued. The formal announcement is next week. Against his better judgment, Dominic flipped open the folder. He'd expected to find some plain-faced scientist, the kind who lived in lab coats and spoke in technical jargon no one understood. Instead, he found himself staring at a woman with intense dark eyes and a composed expression that suggested she analyzed everything with precise calculation. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical style, but even in the professional headshot, there was something undeniably magnetic about her. "Fine," he snapped, masking his surprise with practiced arrogance. "I'll marry her. She should be properly grateful for the Westerly name and resources." Richard stood, buttoning his suit jacket with military precision. "I thought you'd say that." He paused at the door. "One piece of advice, nephew. I've met Naomi Valdez. Don't underestimate her." As Richard left, Dominic poured another drink, gazing out at his city. He had closed billion-dollar acquisitions over breakfast and brought startups to their knees with a single email. He had dated celebrities and socialites who adored his wealth and power. How hard could it be to manage one brilliant scientist? 3,000 miles away, Naomi Valdez closed her laptop with enough force to make her research assistant flinch. The sound echoed through Valmed's executive conference room, 20 floors above Boston's historic harbor. "They're announcing it Monday without even allowing me to review the press release," she said, her voice tight with controlled fury. Her father, Eduardo Valdez, didn't look up from his tablet. At 65, he had perfected the art of appearing calm while orchestrating corporate warfare. The agreement specified a joint announcement. Westerly Tech is simply adhering to the timeline. The agreement also stated I would review all communications, Naomi countered, rising from her chair, her movement precise and controlled. The afternoon sun cast her shadow long across the polished floor. "This isn't just some merger document we're talking about, Dad. It's my life. It's business, Naomi. The biggest breakthrough we've ever made." Eduardo finally looked up, his expression softening slightly. Dominic Westerly is one of the most eligible bachelors in the country. He's also arrogant, impulsive, and treats relationships like temporary investments, Naomi replied, beginning to pace. Have you seen his history? Eduardo shrugged. I've seen our projections after this partnership. Your neural interface will change medicine forever, but we need Westerly's distribution network and capital. Naomi stopped at the window, watching boats navigate the harbor. The city was beginning to light up as dusk approached. She had worked her entire life to be respected in this industry, fighting for every patent, every moment of recognition. Now, I'm just currency in a corporate transaction, she said quietly. No, Eduardo said firmly, joining her at the window. You're the only person I trust to ensure the Westerlys don't consume our technology and discard the people who created it. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Dominic expects a compliant, grateful partner who will stand quietly while he takes credit for your work. A slow smile spread across Naomi's face, transforming her features from beautiful to dangerous. Then Dominic Westerly is in for quite an education. The Westerly Technologies headquarters lobby gleamed with steel and glass, a testament to Dominic's belief that first impressions could make or break a business relationship. The subtle scent of leather and sandalwood permeated the air, a custom, fragrance developed specifically for Westerly offices worldwide. Every detail was calculated to project wealth, power, and uncompromising standards. Naomi Valdez understood the language of power displays all too well. She strode through the lobby in a tailored navy suit, her posture perfect, her heels clicking a decisive rhythm against Italian marble. The security guard straightened imperceptibly as she passed. She'd done her homework, memorized the names of every executive, studied the company structure, and reviewed Dominic's business history with forensic precision. Dr. Valdez, the receptionist greeted her with practiced warmth. Mr. Westerly is expecting you. I'm sure he is, Naomi replied with a professional smile that revealed nothing of her true thoughts. The elevator whisked her to the top floor in perfect silence. When the doors opened, Dominic was waiting, leaning against the wall with calculated casualness that might have fooled someone less observant. His charcoal suit was perfectly tailored to his athletic frame, his sapphire cufflinks matching his tie with meticulous coordination. Welcome to Seattle, he said, extending his hand. His smile was designed to disarm. She'd seen it in countless business magazines. I trust your flight was comfortable. Your private jet certainly beats commercial, she replied, shaking his hand firmly. The brief contact sent an unexpected current up her arm that she immediately dismissed as irrelevant data, though the champagne was a bit much for a 9 a.m. flight. His smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Some appreciate the finer things regardless of the hour. Some mistake luxury for substance, she countered pleasantly. Dominic's eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second before he gestured toward the conference room. Shall we begin? The executive team is eager to meet the woman behind the neural interface that's going to make us all very rich. The neural interface that's going to help millions of paralysis patients walk again, she corrected, her tone light but pointed. Of course, he replied smoothly. Profit and purpose, hand in hand. The meeting proceeded with a careful choreography of two chess masters, each making strategic moves while assessing the other's defenses. Naomi presented her research with brilliant clarity, answering technical questions with effortless expertise that left even the most skeptical executives nodding in appreciation. Dominic watched her command the room, noting how she simplified complex concepts without condescension, how she addressed challenges directly without defensiveness. Despite himself, he was impressed, not that he would ever admit it. Production timeline seems ambitious, he interjected during her presentation on manufacturing requirements. We should adjust expectations by at least 2 quarters. Naomi didn't miss a beat. The timeline is based on extensive testing and realistic production metrics. Perhaps your team isn't accustomed to the efficiency standards we maintain at Valmed. The room fell silent. No one challenged Dominic Westerly's Assessments. My team, he said with dangerous softness, has brought 16 products to market in under 18 months. Your concern for our capabilities is touching but unnecessary. Fitness trackers and smart home devices aren't exactly comparable to Class 3 medical devices, she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But I'm sure you'll catch up quickly. After the meeting, Dominic cornered her in his private office, the Seattle skyline providing a dramatic backdrop to his barely contained frustration. That was quite a performance, he said, closing the door. With deliberate control. Undermining me in front of my executive team isn't the best way to start our ... arrangement. Naomi set down her tablet, meeting his gaze directly. I wasn't aware that accuracy was considered undermining. Should I have nodded and deferred to your expertise in an area where you have none? Dominic moved closer, his presence filling the space between them. Let's get something straight, Dr. Valdez. This may be a business arrangement dressed up as a marriage, but in public and in these offices, we present a united front. United doesn't mean I become your echo, she replied, standing her ground. Despite his proximity, the scent of his cologne registered in her awareness, sandalwood, and something uniquely him that was annoyingly appealing. We have dinner with the board tonight, he said, his voice lowering to a tone that had charmed countless women before her. Perhaps we could attempt to appear as though we don't despise each other. I don't despise you, Mr. Westerly, Naomi replied calmly. That would require emotional investment. I simply recognize you for what you are. His eyebrow raised. And what am I, exactly? A man who's never had to work for anything meaningful in his life. Something flashed in his eyes. Not anger, but something more complex that caught her off guard. For a moment, the practiced charm fell away, revealing something raw and surprisingly genuine. Dinner is at 7, he said finally. I'll send a car. I'll meet you there, she replied. I prefer to maintain my independence. As she left his office, Dominic found himself watching the graceful determination in her stride, begrudgingly admiring the opponent fate had chosen for him. This wasn't going to be the simple acquisition he'd anticipated. The Seattle Symphony Hall transformed into an enchanted forest for the Westerly Foundation's annual gala. Crystal chandeliers hung like stars among suspended greenery, casting dappled light across the gathered elite of the tech and medical worlds. The air hummed with expensive perfume, champagne, and the electric current of power and influence. Dominic adjusted his bow tie in the reflection of a decorative mirror, mentally reviewing the key players he needed to impress tonight. The announcement of his engagement to Naomi had created precisely the market buzz his uncle had predicted. Westerly stock was up 12%, and preliminary partnership inquiries had doubled. Your fiancé has arrived, his assistant murmured. Discreetly in his ear, East entrance. Dominic turned, his practiced smile freezing on his face as he caught sight of Naomi. She wore a deep emerald gown that caught the light, like liquid jade, her usually practical hairstyle replaced by loose waves that framed her face with surprising softness. She wasn't dressed for seduction. The high neckline and elegant cut spoke of taste rather than exhibition, but the effect was undeniably magnetic. He crossed the room with measured steps, aware of the curious eyes tracking this first public appearance of the power couple whose marriage would reshape the medical technology landscape. You look appropriate, he offered as he reached her side, extending a flute of champagne. Naomi accepted the glass with a hint of amusement in her eyes. High praise indeed. Your eloquence is truly remarkable. I'm saving my eloquence for the investors, he replied, offering his arm with exaggerated formality. Shall we begin the performance? To his surprise, she slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow with natural grace. Lead on, future husband. They moved through the crowd with synchronized precision, presenting the perfect image of compatible power. Naomi charmed board members. with insightful questions about their families, while subtly steering conversations toward the medical applications of their partnership. Dominic found himself watching her interactions with growing curiosity. The genuine interest she showed in people's stories, the quick intelligence that allowed her to connect disparate ideas, the flash of passion when discussing her research. "You're staring," she murmured during a momentary reprieve near the orchestra. "Observing," he corrected. "You're surprisingly good at this. Did you expect me to hide in a corner discussing molecular structures with the potted plants?" The corner of his mouth twitched. The thought had crossed my mind. A photographer approached, requesting a photo of the engaged couple. Without discussion, they shifted into position, his arm sliding around her waist with surprising naturalness. Her body fit against his with unexpected rightness, warm and real through the silk of her gown. "Perfect," the photographer exclaimed. "You look like you were made for each other." As the photographer moved away, Dominic found himself reluctant to release her. "You never asked why I agreed to this arrangement," he said quietly. Naomi looked up at him, genuine curiosity replacing her usual guardedness. "I assumed it was for the same reason everyone does anything in your world, profit." He guided her toward the balcony, away from the watching crowd. The Seattle night spread before them, the moon casting silver light across the sound. "My mother was paralyzed in a car accident when I was 8, he said, his voice low and stripped of its usual polish. "She lived for 10 years in a wheelchair, her brilliant mind trapped in a body that betrayed her." Naomi's expression softened with understanding. "Your interest in our neural interface isn't just financial." "The financial aspect is compelling," he admitted. "But no, that's not my primary motivation." "Why didn't you tell me this before?" His smile turned wry. "Would it have changed your opinion of me as a soulless corporate shark?" "Perhaps," she conceded, studying him with new eyes. "Though I reserve the right to maintain that assessment in other areas." A genuine laugh escaped him, surprising them both. "Fair enough." The orchestra began playing, the music drifting out to their private moment on the balcony. Without overthinking, Dominic extended his hand. "Would you dance with me, Dr. Valdez?" "For appearance's sake, of course." "Of course," she echoed, placing her hand in his. "For appearances." As he drew her into the dance, her body moved with his in perfect rhythm, as if they'd been partners for years, rather than adversaries for days. Something shifted between them. Not friendship, not quite desire, but a recognition of unexpected depth in waters they'd both assumed to be shallow. "Your work could change millions of lives," he said as they turned beneath the moonlight, "including those who can't afford cutting-edge medical care." She looked up at him, surprise evident in her expression. "That's always been my goal, though." "Your uncle seemed more interested in luxury applications for the wealthy." "My uncle doesn't speak for me," Dominic replied, his hand tightening slightly at her waist. "Not anymore." Rain lashed against the windows of Westerly Technologies with unrelenting fury, turning Seattle's skyline into a blur of smudged lights and shadow. Naomi stood in Dominic's office, watching lightning split the darkness, her reflection ghostly in the glass. "The trial results are compromised," she said without turning. "Someone altered the data." Behind her, Dominic placed a call on speaker. "Security, this is Westerly. I want the research wing locked down immediately. No one enters or leaves without my express authorization." The storm outside matched the turbulence between them. 3 weeks of cautious cooperation, shattered by betrayal from within. "Your head of development had access," she said, turning to face him. Her eyes were fierce with controlled anger. "Julian Porter has been with your company for 8 years. "Which means nothing if he's compromised our work," Dominic replied, his voice deadly calm. "I don't care if he's family. If he's responsible, he's finished." Naomi studied him, searching for any sign of complicity or deception. Finding none, she nodded once. We need to review the backup data from my secured server in Boston. It's isolated from your network precisely because I anticipated something like this. A hint of admiration crossed his face. You never fully trusted the partnership. I never fully trust anyone, she corrected, moving to the console on his desk. Your security clearance isn't sufficient for this access. I need to override. Without hesitation, Dominic stepped back, giving her complete control of his system. The gesture wasn't lost on her. In 3 weeks of working together, she'd learned enough about him to know that surrender of control was unprecedented. Hours passed as they worked side by side, tracing data anomalies and security breaches through layers of encrypted files. The storm intensified, eventually knocking out power to half the city. The emergency generators hummed to life, casting the office in subdued lighting that softened the usual corporate sterility. There, Naomi said finally, pointing to a string of code on the screen. The alterations began 6 days ago, subtle enough to discredit our results without raising immediate flags. Dominic leaned closer, his shoulder brushing hers. These access credentials ... double quotes, his expression hardened. They're not Julian's. They belong to Neurosphere Medical, your largest competitor. Naomi breathed, the implications crystallizing. They're trying to delay our FDA approval long enough to get their inferior interface to market first, costing us millions and patients years of waiting for effective treatment. Dominic finished, his jaw tight with anger. They worked through the night, reconstructing the original data, documenting the intrusion, and building an airtight case for the FDA and potential litigation. Somewhere around 3 a.m., Dominic ordered food, and they ate perched on his office sofa, surrounded by tablets and printouts. Why? Medicine? He asked during a rare moment of respite, watching her review neural response patterns with unwavering focus. With your mind, you could have dominated any field. Naomi was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. When she did, her voice carried a vulnerability he hadn't heard before. My brother had muscular dystrophy, she said finally. I watched his body fail him bit by bit, while his mind remained brilliant and trapped. By 14, I was determined to build bridges between functioning brains and failing bodies. Dominic's hand covered hers, the gesture instinctive and unplanned. Did he ... He died when I was in graduate school, she said softly, too soon for my work to help him. The confession hung between them, creating a new understanding. Without thinking, Dominic brushed a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her cheek. This is why you fight so hard, he said, his voice rough with newfound respect. It's not about patents or recognition. What about you? She asked, making no move to pull away from his touch. Behind the corporate empire and perfect suits, what drives Dominic Westerly? The relentless fear of becoming my uncle, he admitted, the truth surprising even himself. A man who sees people as assets to be acquired or liabilities to be eliminated. Naomi's smile was gentle with understanding. Hence your reaction when you thought I was just another acquisition. You could never be just anything, he said, the words escaping before he could filter them. The air between them changed, charged with something neither had anticipated. Her eyes met his, no longer calculating or defensive, but open with possibility. His gaze dropped to her lips, the question unspoken but clear. When their lips met, it wasn't the strategic move of business partners maintaining appearances, but something startlingly genuine, gentle at first, then deepening with hunger neither had acknowledged until this moment. The storm raged outside, but within the sheltered space they'd created, something unexpected bloomed, trust taking root, where suspicion had once flourished. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Dominic's penthouse, painting golden patterns across rumpled sheets. Naomi traced idle circles on his chest, her analytical mind unusually quiet in the aftermath of their night together. "This complicates things," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Dominic captured her wandering hand, bringing her fingertips to his lips. "I excel at complications, so I've discovered." Her smile held none of its usual guardedness. "What happens now?" "We've exposed the data breach, secured FDA priority review, and—" she gestured between them, "thoroughly confused our professional boundaries." He propped himself on one elbow, studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. The controlled executive was still there in his eyes, but now accompanied by something warmer, more human. "We could rewrite the terms of our arrangement," he suggested, tracing the curve of her shoulder. "Something less corporate merger, more actual partnership." "Careful, Westerly," she warned, though her tone held more warmth than caution. "That almost sounds like sentiment." "Don't tell anyone," he replied with mock seriousness. "It would ruin my reputation as a heartless tycoon." Naomi sat up, drawing the sheet around her. The playfulness faded from her expression, replaced by characteristic directness. "I need to know something first. If we hadn't exposed the data breach together, if our partnership was still purely strategic, would you have honored my research principles once we merged? The commitment to accessibility, to keeping costs reasonable for patients?" Dominic sat up beside her, his expression equally serious. "Before I met you, probably not. I would have listened to the profit projections and made the sound business decision." His honesty was unexpected and oddly refreshing. No platitudes, no manipulation, just truth. "And now?" She pressed. "Now I understand that your principles aren't idealistic obstacles to profit. They're the foundation of something revolutionary." His hand found hers above the sheets. "You've changed how I see this entire venture, Naomi, how I see my own company's purpose." She studied his face, searching for any trace of the calculated charm he wielded so effectively in boardrooms. Finding none, she allowed herself a moment of hope. "I need guarantees," she said, "written into any personal agreement between us. My work remains mine. Accessibility programs are non-negotiable, and you never use the word acquisition to describe our relationship again." His laugh was genuine, crinkling the corners of his eyes in a way that transformed his features from handsome to truly appealing. "Drawing up relationship contracts already, Dr. Valdez? Should I have my lawyers review the terms?" "I'm serious, Dominic." "I know." He sobered, taking both her hands in his. "And I agree to your terms. All of them. But I have a few conditions. Of my own." Her eyebrow arched with familiar skepticism. "Such as?" "You stop assuming the worst of my intentions." His thumb traced patterns on her wrist. "You consider moving some of your research to Seattle. And you give us whatever this is between us, a genuine chance to develop without strategic calculation." The vulnerability in his request caught her off guard. This was not the Dominic Westerly who commanded boardrooms and intimidated competitors. This was simply a man asking for trust. "Those terms are acceptable," she said softly. Later that afternoon, they stood together in the Westerly Technologies research wing, where their teams had gathered to hear the announcement about the data breach investigation. Scientists and executives from both companies watched with curious eyes as Dominic and Naomi entered, their body language notably different from previous interactions. "As you've heard, we've identified and addressed the security breach in our clinical data," Dominic began, his authoritative voice filling the space. "Thanks to Dr. Valdez's foresight in maintaining secure backups, our FDA submission remains on schedule." Murmurs of relief rippled through the assembled teams. "But there's another announcement today," he continued, his gaze finding Naomi's. "One that represents a fundamental shift in how Westerly Technologies will approach our partnership with Valmed." He outlined a new vision, one that prioritized patient access alongside profit, research integrity alongside market dominance. As he spoke, Naomi watched the faces of her team transform from cautious concern to genuine hope. This isn't just a merger of companies, Dominic concluded, his hand finding Naomi's in a gesture that surprised the audience. It's a true partnership of purpose. The applause that followed wasn't the polite corporate acknowledgement they'd grown accustomed to, but something more authentic, the sound of two teams becoming one, united by something more meaningful than contractual obligation. As they left the research wing, Naomi squeezed his hand. That wasn't in the script we discussed. I'm learning to improvise, he replied with a smile that reached his eyes. Apparently, some of the best outcomes happen when you deviate from the expected path. A dangerous philosophy for a control enthusiast, she teased. Perhaps, he agreed, pulling her closer. But I'm discovering that some risks are worth taking. Outside, Seattle stretched before them, no longer divided into his territory and hers, but a shared landscape of possibility. The terms of their arrangement had been rewritten, not by corporate lawyers or family patriarchs, but by their own hands, creating something neither had anticipated, but both now fiercely protected. A partnership forged not in obligation, but in choice.